The RCMP Heritage Centre is a not-for-profit charitable organisation mandated to share the story of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. This is one of those stories, part of your heritage.
Well, it started, as far as I can remember, when I was in grade 11, and they had a career day, and a member came in to speak to us in red serge. And I thought, boy, wouldn't that be the thing to do? And it stuck with me. I didn't go right away. I worked for National Canadian Drugs for a year, and I worked for the Royal Bank for a year, worked as a reporter on a newspaper, and then finished up at the third year as a bookkeeper and parts man at a Chrysler dealership. And I was sitting at the house I was boarding in Sussex, and the lady of the house and her boyfriend were sitting there, and I looked out the front window, and here's this, I think it was a 51 Chev with a member driving by, and I said, George, that's what I should do. He said, they wouldn't have you in the door. They wouldn't have anything to do with you. And Agnes said, sure they would. And she ran upstairs and got me a clean shirt and whatnot, and had George drive me down to the detachment. Oh yeah, and he had a bet of $5 they wouldn't let me in the door. And I won the $5. Well, that was the start, and I did my exam at the Sussex Detachment, and then I got a letter saying you've been accepted, and we want you in Fredericton to be sworn in. Give us a date. Well, I was not wanting to miss that date, so I gave him my birthday, July the 8th, and I went by bus there, and they swore me in, put me in barracks overnight, and put me on the train in the morning, and went to Fairmont Training Sub in Vancouver. And it was 5 days and 5 nights on the train. And I swore to somebody on the train that we better quit or we're going to fall off the edge of the earth. It was 5 days and 5 nights. But anyway, one of the boys from the squad ahead picked me up at the train station and took me in. He was, I forget his real name, but burly guy. Said, I'm Rocco, I run this place. And he was in the squad ahead of me. So when he brought me in, there were quite a few of the squad members already in this big room. So he was taking me around, introducing me. And where are you from and whatnot. And I came to Ken Mackay, we used to call him Blackie. And he said, where are you from? And I said, Sussex, New Brunswick. And I said, how about you? He said, well, I'm here in Vancouver. Shook hands and walked by, and about 3 people down, I heard the comment, what the hell boat did he come in on? I didn't think I had any accent, but he told me afterwards it's not so much the accent as the phrases and the maritime expressions you use. So we got busy, and having been quite a gymnast in my younger days, I got along well with that, but unfortunately, within about 9 days, I broke my left wrist. And, but I kept on doing the gymnastics. I could do the pommel horse and everything else with a cast on. And I kept that on, and I was afraid they wouldn't graduate me, but they did. And you know, I got nothing but fond memories of Fairmont. I remember one of the guys complaining about the food. And I said, good Lord, I've never eaten this well in my life. It was wonderful. Another guy was complaining one day, Harry Brandis, got to be a superintendent eventually. And he said, what a miserable bunch of characters these instructors are. They're mean and whatnot. I said, mean? My old man will make them look like candy. He's tough as nails. But it was a great experience, that 4 months out there. And we graduated from there and went to Depot. That was an experience and a half. We were marched out on the parade square, and Baldy Stevens was the drill corporal, and he was a holy terror. But underneath a nice guy, but they were good actors. And he was walking down and making fun of each one as he got to him. Bill Topolnitsky had been in a motorcycle accident, and he had a big scar on his face, and he was very conscious of it. We'd go out and he'd sit like this. Baldy comes by him and he said, and you, Scarface, where the hell did you come from? talker, you could just see the steam coming out of his ears. Big, strong lad. He got to me and he looked over at somebody at the front of B block and said, "Where in the hell did you find this?" I was 6'2" and 143 pounds, fighting wildcat. And he said, "Yeah, where the hell did you get this?" And he said to the one fellow, "You, run over to the mess and get me a can of tomato juice. We'll use this one for a thermometer this winter." So it wasn't a friendly welcome that we got, but they put us through our paces, and I felt the same. There was a lot of complaining about how tough these instructors were, and I can handle that. And like I said to one of the fellows, if you can't handle it in here, you'll never handle it on the street. So get used to it, because everybody isn't going to be gentle to you. Well, I finally got my cast off and got to learn to swim. Couldn't swim a stroke when I went in there, but I got my bronze medallion, my bronze cross, and I was going to swim for my award of merit, and I was in the gymnastics, and I broke my other wrist. Thanks to Bill Perry. You know Bill? He had that squad so jumpy that the minute the whistle blew, everybody collapsed. So they built this for finale, a human pyramid. And I was about the only one that could do it. They were on the parallel bars, knees up, and if I tried to climb up, and of course they would fall. So I come off the springboard and flew up in the air and landed on Vern Meyer's knees, and he caught my shoulders like that, and I did an arch up in the top. Well, I was pretty proud of it. And but everybody was so jumpy with Bill Perry. He blew the whistle, and Vern dropped his knees, and I landed on the floor, another broken wrist. But luckily, they let me out again, and I went to A Division, to Parliament Hill. I remember that because I had them fix the sleeve so it would fit over this. That was my right arm this time. And they had the tailor opened up a glove for me so that I could stand at Parliament Hill. And we were standing on guard for the Governor General's bench in there. And of course, when he came out, he was a guy about this big. And his little footmen were shorter than him. I guess it made him feel a little better. And they came marching out there, and I stood to attention. And he stopped, and I hadn't saluted, and he looked at me. And the corporal that was standing back, I had just my first day out there. He said, "What's the matter, you got a broken arm?" And I said, "Yes, sir." So I wasn't very popular there, but we were all in barracks. There were 45 of us, single men, and we were standing by for VIP escorts and whatnot, and we did quite a few of those. And in the meantime, we were on Parliament Hill. And one night, Mike Junka and I got talking about this cast. I was getting so sick of it. It got into the way of everything. So we got into the washroom, and somebody had a jackknife, and we soaked it and took the cast off. The next day we went in for duty, and the sergeant there said, "Hey, one arm, where's your cast?" And I said, "Well, it came off." And he said, "They don't come off." And finally got out of me, we took it off, and he said, "All right, you're going over to DVA." And I went there, and the doctor said, "Well, we'll put one on that you can't take off this time." And it was from there to there and heavy. So I went back to see Sergeant Taggart. God, where's that been for 80 years? And so he said, "Well, you're no good to us here. Where are you from?" I told him. He said, "Well, I'll give you a pass for 6 weeks until you get that thing off." So I went home and worked on the farm for 6 weeks. Enjoyed every bit of it. And when I got back, he said, "Well, it's time you fellows went to work." I was transferred to Halifax, Nova Scotia. And I spent the next 5 years in Halifax, Lunenburg, Port Hawkesbury, Inverness, and Sydney. So, but then I had 6 years service, and I got transferred to Whitehorse from Sydney. And that was a long drive. I drove by myself. And as soon as I got there, I'd been on the liquor squad and GIS and whatnot. The two on GIS up there grabbed me and hid me. They took my car and hid it, and they said, "Go get your cleanest dirty shirt. You're going down the highway and hitchhike back, you're going undercover." Well, they have undercover courses now. But they drove me 25 miles back down the gravel road, and I hitchhiked in, got a grubby old hotel, and I was undercover for 3 months. That is a harsh, tough job. You really do have to be on your toes because you're living a lie the whole time, and be careful what you say. I was sitting in a pub with a bunch of guys I'd gotten to know. What a rough bunch. And a guy come in I hadn't seen before, and he looked down at the group and he's pointing at me. He said, "Who the hell is that?" "Oh, that's Johnny 𝐻𝑒_𝑟𝑖𝑡." He said, "I can smell a cop a mile away. I'm not sitting here." The guy said, "Oh, never mind. Sit down, behave yourself." And he looked at me again. He said, "How long have you been a cop?" And I turned around and I popped him right there in the jaw, and down he went to the floor. I said, "Anybody else want to try that?" "No, sir." But it was quite a life. But 3 months I cleaned up every bootlegger and whatnot in Whitehorse, and they sent me out to Mayo and other places. I went to Carcross, and Bill Pringle was there in charge, and he said, "Well, I got a guy here that's driving me nuts, and can you get him?" And I said, "Well, point me at him. I got all the rest." So I went over there. I went in and I said, "I need a bottle of wine." "Oh yeah, well, sit down. I'll pour you a drink." So I sat down, and he said, "Well, how long have you been a Mountie?" Talk about choked up. I don't know what my face must have looked like. He shook my hand and said, "No, not this time, buddy." It was quite an experience. And then I went back in detachment, and then it was off to, oh yeah, and I met my wife in Whitehorse. She was a nurse from northern Alberta. We got engaged that year, and then I went to Dawson City, and that started a rumor. We got engaged before I left for Dawson, and we were going to get married the next year in June. So I went to Dawson, and we traveled back and forth in my car. It's 336 miles of gravel road. So we decided this is ridiculous. So we moved the date up to February the 10th. I think every calendar in the detachment was marked with the numbers on it. Nobody believed us at all. So we had our first one 3 years later. But I spent 2 years and 7 months in Dawson, then back to Whitehorse for 2 years, in my own detachment at Carmax for a year, and the first one was born at Carmax. And then she being a nurse, public health nurse, I guess that was the reason. I was the first married man ever sent that far north. I went to Spence Bay up in the Central Arctic. And by then we had a 10-month-old boy. And he said, the CO came around to talk to us. And he talked to my wife, and he said, "What do you think of going up to Spence Bay?" She said, "Wherever he's going, I'm going." And he said, "Well, how'd it be if I make him a corporal?" "Well, that'd be fine with me." So we got transferred to Spence Bay with a 10-month-old baby. It was quite a story came out of that, because he got to be, 2 years old while we were there. And he used to go out and play in this park in Mucklucks. But when we first started with him, my wife is Russian heritage, and she speaks Russian. And she said, "Well, I'll speak to Jeff in Russian, and you speak to him in English, and he'll grow up like I did, bilingual." So this is what we did. And when he got old enough to go out and play, he was playing with the Eskimo kids, and they were speaking Eskimo, Inuktitut. And after a few months, he used to come in, and he'd come up with the darndest saying. We couldn't understand half what he was saying. It'd be a mixture of Eskimo, Russian, and English. And somebody, Bruce Myers, the Northern Service officer, said, "You shouldn't be doing that. That kid's not going to know how to talk by the time you're done." So we stopped doing that. And while I was there, I was only there about 2 or 3 weeks. And the plane came around from the federal government to pick up the Eskimo kids. I saw that happening, and it was just a terrible thing. So Ernie Lyle was the Northern Affairs interpreter and guide, quite a character. He wrote quite a book. And so John Avison was my second man, so I said, "Why don't you go with Ernie and see how everything's doing up there?" And the Boothia Peninsula is a peninsula at the top of the Canadian continent. Anything further than that is into the islands. I had the magnetic North Pole in my detachment area. And it was about the size of Saskatchewan, and I had 24 sled dogs to travel with. But the airplane came in, sent John up, and he came back and he said, they had a murder up there this past summer, but they haven't been able to get in because of the ice is canceled and whatnot. So it took a while before I could get back up there, and when I got back up there, I got the story through my special. This woman had gone quite mad. She had a reputation for being quite mad too, but they were frightened of her because they believed that mental illness is contagious, and if she breathed her breath on you, you would get the same way. And she also used to sneak into people's tents. This was in July. And she grabbed one woman's baby and ran outside with it and threw it up in the air and let it land on the rocks. So they figured they had to do something. And one of the comments of the Eskimos there was about 3 or 4 igloos with 3 or 4 families. She got so she was running around on the rocks in her bare feet, so she must have been mad. Had to be crazy. So the 2 elders, her husband, 𝑇ℎ𝑒 𝐹𝑟𝑖𝑒, and her brother-in-law, 𝐻𝑒𝑟𝑖𝑡, the 2 seniors sat down and they said, we'll tie her up so she can't get near anybody, and we'll take the dogs and we'll go over to an island. So they did that, and every time they did that, within half an hour, she'd be untied and waving her arms around. So they figured she had an agnacock, which is an evil spirit in her, and that they couldn't stop that. So the next time they tied her to a rock, and she got out of that again. So they called in her nephew, 𝐻𝑒𝑟𝑖𝑡, 26-year-old young hunter, great kid. And they said, go over there and take your rifle, and if she comes towards you, don't let her get you. Shoot both sides of her and scare her so she runs away into the tundra, and if she dies, that's not our fault. Well, her own son, 𝐻𝑒_𝑟𝑖𝑡, said, you're not going alone. I'm going with you. So they both took their rifles and went over, and she come running at them, waving her arms and hair flying, big woman. Oh, before that, one of the things that really I'll never forget, I was living in an igloo with 𝐻𝑒𝑟𝑖𝑡's father and mother, and it never got above 65 below in the 8 days I was there. And we got into a whiteout, and we had 44 dogs total there, and we ran out of dog feed. So we had to go hunting. And we looked for, you look for a dark spot in the sky, and you'll see there's a lead opened up, and there'd be seals there. So 𝐻𝑒𝑟𝑖𝑡 and I got on one sled, and my special, 𝐻𝑒𝑟𝑖𝑡, and 𝐻𝑒𝑟𝑖𝑡 got on the other. And away we went. And I've told the recruits when I've talked to them out here, you don't just outlaw everybody because of something you heard. 𝐻𝑒𝑟𝑖𝑡 sat on the sled with his .30-30 in front of him, and I sat behind him, and I had him under arrest for capital murder. So away we went to the Bellot Strait, and we were at one end of it with our rifles and our harpoons, all caribou skin from head to foot, and 𝐻𝑒𝑟𝑖𝑡 and 𝐻𝑒𝑟𝑖𝑡 were at the other end. And if a seal popped up, they'd shoot it, and it would drift down, and we would put a harpoon in and pull it out for dog feed. And our dogs were laid down, 100, 150 yards away. So we were standing there. I didn't realize there was such a riptide there, but that's what kept the water open all winter. And we were standing there, and all of a sudden 𝐻𝑒𝑟𝑖𝑡 grabbed his harpoon and took off. I thought, well, those dogs must be getting away. And all of a sudden I felt everything moving under me, and 𝐻𝑒𝑟𝑖𝑡 hollered at me. He was an Eskimo. He came running back, and he reached out with his harpoon and pulled me off the ice, and saved my life. And he was carrying a rifle, and so was I, and he pulled me off that ice, and the whole thing went up like that with the tide change and smashed backwards. I'd have gone with it. One of the rarest cases that I think I can imagine. I was involved in a lot. My first year in Lunenburg, I was involved in 19 fatals in the first year. And I'd never seen the dead body in my life before. But 𝐻𝑒𝑟𝑖𝑡 is in Arctic Red River now, and 𝐻𝑒𝑟𝑖𝑡's in Spence Bay. I've stayed in touch. So we spent a wonderful 2 years there, and then it was off to Inuvik for 2 more years. I took over Inuvik detachment, and while I was there, there was a memo come in from headquarters to the OC saying there's a movie company from California they've got all the transcripts from the reports that I wrote on the Eskimo woman's murder case. I guess we don't need her name, but Susie was her name. And they were making a movie of that whole thing. It was such a rare one. And we'd like Corporal Hodgson seconded back to Spence Bay for the time it takes them to make it to authenticate the whole thing. The OC said, no, he's too busy. I was in charge of the detachment then, and 12-man detachment. And of course, in the summertime, we lost half of them, and I was working double shift, run the detachment during the day and working in the guard room at night. And they eventually made a movie, and just to follow that a little bit, I eventually ended up here in Regina, and I was sitting watching TV one night, and I still watch APTN, there's a lot of northern stuff there. And I said to Nadia, come and look at this, it's pictures of the North. And she came out, she said, that's Spence Bay. And I'll be damned, I watched it. Saw myself in red serge in court, heard everything I said, and they had it verbatim. Me holding the rifle and whatnot. Ran into a bit of a ticklish one with the rifles. I took Schuich's gun when I went back to Spence Bay and shipped it to the lab here. Well, back comes the memo and the telex and whatnot. What in the hell are you doing up there? That's a 30-30 bullet and a 308 rifle. How did you pick that out? I didn't have a clue. So I went back up there. And I told them what happened. And they said, oh, that's what happened. I used a IOT's rifle. So we got it straightened out. And it was quite a 2 years up there, I'll tell you. So 2 years in Inuvik, and back 2 more years in Whitehorse. And then, funny how they used to do these things with the transfers. I had been out to Vancouver on an escort one time and talked to my old boss, Bob Hunter, and he said, come on out and have a visit with us tonight. A friend of mine was an old schoolmate, and turned out his friend was Harry Dupe from Miller and Dupe Real Estate. And Bob said, you should buy some land out here. I hadn't even dreamed of it before, but Harry took me out and showed me this beautiful 10 acres hobby farm, a little house and a barn and a creek in it. I couldn't resist it. I hung around and I bought it. The staffing came around and said, well, usually with that many years up there, they get a choice of your division. I said, I'd like to go to E Division, to BC. And I said, I'll go Burnaby Detachment. Nobody wanted to go there, just town policing. So they said, okay, we'll see what we can do. Finally, the telex come in, you're transferred to Yorkton, Saskatchewan. Isn't that typical? Well, it turned out to be the best thing that ever happened, and a few years later we sold that, and things had appreciated a bit since I had bought it. That we really enjoyed Yorkton, and then I got transferred in here, in charge of the drug squad, which I did for 4 years. And then I was interviewed, and my children by then were 10. My daughter was born when we were in Inuvik, by the way. They were 10 and 13, and they'd been to, I don't know how many places and schools. The staff, he said, well, we got some plans for you, including a nice white shirt, and we want you to take your transfer. You can't do it here, there's no place for you. And my wife and I talked about it, and for the kids' sake, we said, thank you very much, but no thanks. And I retired and stayed. Finished my 25 years on a Friday night, and went to work with Remax on Monday morning, and worked for them for 30 years. And retired 7 years ago, the second time. So it's been a hell of a life. I told somebody the other day, I didn't even go to the grocery store without a gun on my belt. I was in plain clothes. But they knew who we were. There were some strange things going on. When I arrested the mayor of Sydney, that was after a bad situation. We were doing surveillance on him, Bob Barnum and I. And Sydney, Nova Scotia, there's lots of hills. And the mayor was down on the flats, so he'd sneak out at night and steal some drugs from a doctor's car or something like that. So we were trying to catch him doing it. And I was sitting there by myself about 2 or 3 in the morning. And the car rolled up with the window down, and there were 2 big, ugly-looking steel workers. He used to be the steel workers president, and he had big power, I'll tell you. And they said, if you're still here in the morning, you'll get a shotgun through your front window, and they boom, away they went. I thought, ooh, that's a little scary. I wouldn't like that. So I thought, well, what the hell do I do now? I thought there was only one thing to do. I drove down and parked right in front of the mayor's door so that if anything happened, the boys would know who did it. That was one of the greatest frights I had. I was just young then, about 5 years, 6 years service. But the idea of a shotgun through the window is, and knowing the mayor and his crew, it wouldn't surprise me if they'd do it. There were two outfits in Vancouver, one white and one Chinese, who were importing heroin by the boatload and cocaine and whatnot. And that was about the time that the CLU came into being, the Coordinated Law Enforcement Unit. And that was funding by the municipal, provincial, and federal, all into one pot. And they were just kicking the junior out of the big dealers out there. And they had seized a couple of boatloads, which is about enough to break the dealers. Well, one of our top dealers here, if not the top one, was very much connected with the white dealership. And he was out, well, we tagged him, and he decided he'd rather be friendly with us than get it run against us. So we turned him, and he told us a story about this, and that he was the contact. What they were doing out there was bringing it in and get it through the States into Regina, and then transshipping it to the East Coast and whatnot. And he kept us posted on what was going on there, but there was a flood of heroin come in here. And there's some pretty bad scenes with that. We'd take down one outfit, and next thing you know, there was a second line group was breaking legs and shooting people and whatnot. It was a pretty rough road. It was interesting, but I don't want to do it again. I felt good about getting through it, and we did eventually shut down the guys out in Vancouver. The 14 of them went for 20 years apiece, right out of my little section right here. I was pretty proud of that. Fun days.